Are we on? Okay. Do we want to close the doors or leave them open? Okay. Welcome everybody to a different type of event. This is the COP Week 2 Waystation for those raising the ambition on food systems, the state of food systems at COP 28 and the road to COP 30. My name is Brent Loken, and I will be one of your hosts for this, along with Sarah Farley. And we will be your guides for this discussion over the next 60 minutes. This event is hosted by WWF, Rockefeller, and Global Alliance for the Future of Food. And when thinking about this event, we wanted to do something different. Thus, you can see we're arranged like this. We did not want to have a panel. And you can see here where the panel guest should be, there's nobody there. So this is like the anti-panel, whatever you want to call that. We wanted to make this event real-time, part real-time sense-making of what's been going on so far at COP, part halftime huddle, since it's a halfway mark, and part adaptive management strategy. So, the past week at COP has seen two different stories at play. One positive story that is playing out with a number of declarations, calls to actions, financial pledges for the food system. That is fantastic. The other, maybe a less positive story, that gets into the breakdown of formal negotiations. For the next 60 minutes, we would like to reflect on COP so far and engage in an open and honest discussion with each one of you. And this is important. This is not a panel. We want to hear from every single one of you in terms of your reflections on COP so far, what we've accomplished, and even your personal reflections on how you're feeling in terms of this is going. What do you feel about being here? We're going to reflect on a couple of questions such as what does success look like at COP? And are we on track to achieve the success? What else needs to be done to ensure success before we leave Dubai? And looking ahead, how can we better collaborate on the road to COP 30 to ensure high ambition? And that will lead up to Lasse Brun, who has some words to say about that for something tomorrow that we're going to be hosting. This event is not our event. This event is your event. It's a chance to stop, to sit down, to breathe, to reflect. And we look forward to hearing from each one of you and hearing about both your professional and also your personal experiences at COP so far. So this is an open and honest dialogue for the next 60 minutes. And with that, I will pass this. We have a one-person panelist up here. Thank you, Peter. I'm going to pass it on to Sarah.
Well, and I'm excited to get rid of this microphone quickly because it really is unique. I think to have, there's so many people driving so many interesting agendas. We all came in at different moments. We're leaving at different moments. So let's just use this hour really effectively to connect up, hopefully a more joined up agenda than what we might be experiencing individually. So tons of folks here. We did think it would help us to at least queue up a first person to put some crumbs on the table. So I'm going to pass it to Patty.
Okay, my crumbs are thoughts from the last 5 minutes. So, we had expectations coming in. We knew that there was a declaration. We had seen some drafts. We knew that it wasn't going to mention fossil fuels, but we were going to call for it anyways. It was so important. The good news is that NDCs are mentioned in there. Good news is that more than 140 countries have signed on. It's still only focused on adaptation with slight reference to emissions. I've heard that there is some, US is signing on to some discussion around fossil fuels in general, not for food, but so at least that discussion is feel like it's moving forward more than I would expect being here. Negotiations, Brent, as you said, is breaking down. It will come back. This is what happens in the midweek. It's like you start over again, and then you start to mobilize forces, going back out to the countries and having countries kind of table keywords back in, putting commas back in the right places, right? This is where I rely on legal brains to make that happen. And what I've heard also is, you know, we came in with high expectation. This is the road to COP30, and the Brazilians saying, no, it's going to be smaller. Wait, hold on. Manage expectations. What are we actually expecting, right? So this is a big moment for us, but also it goes into the second part of, you know, we can't expect just more declarations. What is actually needed for us as a community? What do we have to demonstrate in 2 years? How do we, you know, the next round of NDCs are due in 14 months. We have to go back in our respective ways, and all of us can do this, but, you know, how are countries being supported with the declaration to actually start to integrate in a more ambitious way food and agriculture into their climate plans? And then more generally, just reflecting on what I'm seeing, hearing around just narratives, and just for us as a community, both food systems, but food and climate community. One is around narratives around commitments around regenerative, you know, and food and climate, and even like financial commitments. You know, everyone, journalists asking, what does that mean? I'm like, I don't know. You know, what's the devil's in the detail? How is actually the money being channeled down to those who need it? You know, you're saying you're committed to regenerative, but actually, how are you really centering farmers? Are you actually shifting power so farmers have more of a choice in terms of the relationship and what they can grow, how they're growing it? We don't, you know, there's a lot of work. So that there is, I think, as has happened with fossil fuel sector and energy transition, we are seeing it now with food and agriculture, and I think we have to be much more prepared in saying it's not enough just to say you're committed to regenerative. What type of regenerative are you committed to? How, not only on environmental impacts, but also on social impacts. And then as those in the kind of the broader climate community coming to realize, okay, food is really important, there's still kind of work amongst us to be coming to the table and going, we need a better shared understanding of what we're actually aiming for in terms of both mitigation and adaptation and what the solutions might be. I think there's still tensions in this space. And traditionally in the climate space, especially in the mitigation space, there are certain pathways, and it doesn't quite, for food, it's different starting point and different, you know, kind of set of dimensions to think about, but we haven't had that discussion in a kind of open way of what are all the considerations, what are the complexities, and can we get to a place of simplifying narrative so that we can actually have a united front to battle some of the, let's say, conventional or industrial interests that are locking in, but still recognize that we need to have the nuance and the diversity of approaches. So those are the questions in my mind, just, you know, at the highest level.
Next, reflections, things that aren't working for you, dots you want to connect in this room as we go to week 2. Yeah.
Sorry, Sarah. Sarah throws everything everywhere. I'm Lisa Sweet. A couple of just random reflections. Patty, I think you did an amazing job of kind of this overall capture. I want to highlight on something that hopefully everybody in this room is a part of. It's the WhatsApp group that has been providing all this amazing information to this community. And I think what's so compelling about that is you have this somewhat informal organization of this group of, I don't know if it's 600 or more people who are getting this steady stream of information. There's a bit of dialogue on there. There's some opinions on there. There's way too much posting of side events. We know that. But it's starting to bring a group together. And when I look around COP and when I've been going to some of the sessions, there are some that are very well attended, and there's a gazillion that are half empty, and there are the 555 events, and we've got 2 COPs now. So when we come to COP 29, can we consolidate a bit? Can we be better organized? Can we let go of our egos and bring together efforts where they need to be brought together so that we can create those economies of scale and voice on a series of things rather than a proliferation of everything and anything, which dilutes us. So it's a bit of a positive and a bit of a negative, and a call to everybody to look forward and come together and give a little bit so that we can get more done as a community.
How do you see that happening? I mean, how do you see is there more than one mic so we're not like, okay, perfect. How do you see this consolidation happening? Like what form does it take?
So I guess,
I mean, some sort of redundancy is probably good, but I mean,
some
how much
redundancy
do we?
for sure is good. Is this, yeah, this is on. I mean, I guess we all lobby Lawrence Haddad to let Oliver stay in some sort of coordination role between now and then. We've seen the pavilions. We know how many there are. We know who's been leading them. So actually starting now, maybe Rockefeller can give a little money to coordination efforts. You're asking to be specific, so I'm being specific, right? Somebody who actually has a role and a responsibility to bring everybody together and to start the process a bit earlier of saying, hey, what's this roadmap? Where do we land? What are the key topics? Okay, can we start to cluster them? Can we make them into better groupings, better thematics? Those are two concrete suggestions.
You know what's interesting on the pavilion thing, which is it's just such a strange market, right? The money that goes into the pavilions, the determination of when, who, how, what, it's all very challenging. One win, and we did lobby for this, can we get the food pavilions closer so that the community itself can be closer? But here's my question now, observing it, just because of the spatial layout, I feel, and Robin and I were having this conversation, I feel like our let's say converted community is inside of building 79. I don't know about 89, wherever we are. I don't know about you, but I don't feel like I'm getting the serendipitous interactions with the not converted. And so unless you got yourself into really unlikely spaces or just left more space on your calendar than I did, which is a huge faux pas, you know, that's a question I have. I don't know if the people listening to the events I'm speaking at are in any way convinced, because they probably knew more about the topic than I did to begin with. And so, you know, is it about diversification, planning ourselves in different spaces, or is it about consolidation? And I'm seeing some head nods, but I feel like it'd be great to have like a more organized strategy on that. You're nodding. Who are you? Do you have a comment?
I just wanted to be encouraging, that's all. I'm Richard Barth. I'm with the Robertson Foundation. I was nodding because I think the intersectionality of food, you know, makes your comments just really resonate. And then the only reflection I'd share is I've been to 2 COPs, and for all who were there last year and are here this year, food's arrival is just so palpable. And so for people who are wondering about all the challenges, and they're immense, just for someone who's new to the field, seeing what's moved in 12 months, it's remarkable. So for everyone who made that possible, I hope you're feeling really good about that, even as we may have to handle proliferation issues. I'd rather have that be the problem than the reverse, so. Proliferation of space, of content being dispersed.
Yeah, thanks. I like your comment. I also was wondering how to consolidate this, but my name is Martina Fleckenstein. I'm with WWF International in our food program. But I was wondering, and I was reflecting, I think we still are in our bubble. And that's a little bit the challenge. I think it's super nice to be here and you meet all your friends, and it's like coming to a family, and it's really fun, and it's great to see the energy. But for me, I'm really wondering how we could bring this energy in the other pavilions, yeah? And this is for me more a strategic approach to figure out how to get in the member state pavilions, how to spread the topics we have. And I think that's maybe now we are discussing the GST. The GST people, the negotiator, they are from the environmental ministry. Our contacts are mainly with the agriculture ministry, and that's also something we should work on, how really we could diversify our approaches and our content to other places. I a little bit disagree with you. It's about on reiteration. I think you have to repeat, repeat, repeat if you want to set agendas. So even you duplicate things. As we have this year, the strategy SSJW to have the same event in 2 different pavilions in 2 different weeks. Yeah, so to reach a different audience, and that's a little bit to think about on the future. Where is the best place to have our events and to be more strategic on really reaching those who are not in this huge community already, and think that's my reflection on yours and what the other said.
Great, thanks. Hi everyone, my name is Michelle Tichelaar. I'm currently with Center for Ocean Solutions and soon with World Fish. And wanted to comment a bit on what Sarah and Martina said, both about the silos and the different pavilions. So I'm focusing mostly on blue food, so fisheries and aquaculture in the context of climate change here. And oceans and food are both relatively new on the scene of COPs as major themes, but they're currently in 2 different buildings. So ocean takes up half of nature over there. And I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to cover this intersection within COP. So a great advancement in this area was Oceans and Climate Change Dialogue this June in Bonn, focused on fisheries and food security. But we saw there that I think the concrete policy asks were a bit more underdeveloped when it came to the other theme, which was blue carbon, where people have been really building these coalitions a lot longer. In terms of concrete policy arenas for blue foods, we were really looking for the Sharm el-Sheikh joint work. A lot of African countries in particular had fisheries and aquaculture high on their agenda. But then we talked to some of the other negotiators, and sort of to Martina's point of, we only talk to the ag people. The agriculture people report to us, well, you know, we don't talk to the ocean people. Or in some countries, the fisheries sit with agriculture, and others they don't. So I think there's a lot of silo breaking that needs to happen there. Also really important to highlight in both the context of global goal and adaptation and global stock take that I guess now there's a lot of work to get food in there, and you know, in some way it's easy to make blue foods also included there, just add fisheries after you say farmers. But I think there's also some really, you know, specific needs like ocean acidification or fish stocks moving or storm events increasing will require very specific monitoring or adaptation needs. And then, sorry, I don't want to take up too much time, but I think in Martina's event earlier, they were talking about how much of the financing is going to agriculture, agri-food systems out of the, I guess it was an identified need of 25% and only 4-point-something% is going. Well, of that, only 1% is currently going to fisheries and aquaculture, and a lot of that countries haven't even assessed their fishery and aquaculture adaptation needs. So just, I guess, highlighting a lot of gaps here and a lot of need to work on the intersections between oceans, food, and climate. So yeah, thanks.
Hi, I'm Robin Millington with Planet Tracker. I just wanted to pick up on this whole thing about preaching to the converted, or how do we get to the non-converted? And the problem is anything here is going to be people who already know the process. We get our blue badges, we come in here. I've been mostly in the city, and a lot of the meetings I'm having there are people that are not as integrated into the thinking process as we all are here. So I would offer 2 thoughts to everybody. One is that the non-converted don't tend to come here. So what is the agenda for this group thinking forward? I speak at things like The Economist or City and Financial to room full of people that don't know anything about biodiversity or nature. You know, the classic question is, why is nature important? And we're still asking that question. But in those venues, you get the non-converted. And how can we actually establish a program where we're building towards the next COP, but actually speaking in the venues where people need to hear us, and then use this as the rallying of the troops, the exchange of information between us, and also do more things out in the non-blue zone, not even green zone, but there are all sorts of programs. Bloomberg Green, the World Climate Foundation program, and there are a lot of corporates in there that are here to lobby, to be honest. They're not actually here to be supportive of and those are the people we need to really be getting to. I mean, it's hard, isn't it? Because it's so good to get together and we exchange information, and it gives us that energy. We need that, right? But the thing is, I think you could divide and conquer, because there are, thousands of people in the city right now that are having meetings where none of these voices are actually talking to them in the right sort of way. So I don't know the answer to that question, Brent, but I'm just posing it as a thought to everybody. And how do we do it over the course of a year, not just wait until the COP to make that happen?
Great, thank you. So I think I agree with, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but the comment, I think these are growing pains, and it's actually really good, because the growth is unbelievable in just a year or two. I think, to Patty's point early on, the food declaration doesn't have everything we want, but it is the biggest thing that will have happened. I mean, maybe getting food language in the GST, depending on what it is. If it's very focused on sectoral wins, maybe that's bigger, but otherwise it's the food declaration. And so how do we translate the win of 140 countries saying food and climate is important, and we're gonna put food in our NDCs into something more over the next couple of years? I think that's gonna be critical, and I think what we all could be doing is focusing more on that process, and I totally agree with you on the outside as well. But I think we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves either, because all of this is a testament to the fact that food has arrived, and so we just need to take the next step.
Victoria Crawford at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, just tripping over Lisa's handbag here. So yeah, maybe to pick up on something that Robin was alluding to about the kind of spread of more and less ambitious stakeholders in this space, is I think that a really critical piece to better engaging the wider community and to driving the multi-stakeholder solutions that we need is about building trust and accountability. And I think we've actually had some pretty positive steps on those topics. So the non-state actor call to action, which brought together a whole range of different stakeholders, so farmers, communities, cities and businesses all signing the same statement. That's actually the first time that that's happened. All of these groups have been signing statements and declarations independently, but for it to be kind of agreed with the same text, I think is quite a significant step in the right direction. And similarly, this needs to be backed up by accountability, and we've seen a lot of movement on the topic of accountability, not necessarily attached to specific thematic topics, but for example, WBCSD's main kind of institutional priority has been this corporate performance and accountability system that we've launched this week, which is sector agnostic. So I think that's kind of moving in the right direction. But one area where I feel there is a bit of a gap is that if we really want to engage this wider community, including the less ambitious players and the ones that aren't currently in the room, is being a bit more open to actually engaging all of these stakeholders. So particularly like looking at positioning businesses on panels, we always go after about 3 companies who are like the safe bets to put on the panel, and maybe just being a little bit more risk taking in going for different voices and actually having like an open dialogue would be helpful in both like building understanding of what are the actual challenges that different groups are facing and like why is it difficult, as well as bringing everyone onto the same page and rising the overall level of ambition.
Can I jump on that point? I think it's a really interesting suggestion, and as somebody who's tried to arrange side events, as I suspect many of us have, is there a way of creating a speaker panelist marketplace? Because, Planet Tracker, we don't naturally have a great deal of contact with Indigenous peoples groups, for example, but we'd love to include them in dialogue with finance. I think it's really important. Managed to this year for the first time, but that's hard. And again, I'm towards the older end of the spectrum now, unfortunately. So dialogue with youth groups, again, it doesn't sort of feature in the senior finance people. They all tend to be quite old. So how do we make contact with them? If there was a way of just sort of basically people putting up their hand and saying, I'm going to be at this COP, I'm happy to take part in panels, please invite me, that alone would encourage a much broader mix of ideas, I think. Yeah.
Hi there, Laza, UN Foundation. Let me just start by saying, in order of introducing tomorrow, as Brent asked me to, so tomorrow night we're gonna be in this room again, a little bit later from 7:30 to 9 o'clock to kind of have a continuation of this conversation. There we're gonna go a little bit deeper in some of the issues. We're gonna be discussing the global stocktake. We're gonna be discussing the global goal on adaptation, the Sharm el-Sheikh joint work process, but the vast majority of the time is gonna be spent on focusing on Brazil and the road to COP30, and we're going to have Maria Neto from the Institute for Climate and Society in Brazil leading that conversation. So I just wanted to say that now to get that out of the way. What I wanted to suggest in terms of this conversation, I very much agree with the conversation and the remarks made so far in terms of we need to engage different stakeholders, we need to be better at collaborating, not just in the 2 months leading up to the COP, but in between. But let's also be realistic. We have wildly different theories of change, wildly different constituencies, wildly different aspirations, goals mandated by our different organizations and our beneficiaries and benefactors, sorry, rather. So we also need to be realistic about to which level we actually can collaborate going forward. And I think an interesting exercise would be sometime in, should we say in a couple of weeks? No, just kidding. Like when we come into the new year, January, February, start having an exercise with all these people here together and those showing up tomorrow, where we essentially, in lack of a better way of explaining, do a Venn diagram, where we take all the different pieces of work from the business coalitions, from the NGO coalitions, from philanthropy, from everybody else, and see where are the biggest overlays. And out of those overlays and stuff we really agree on, which are the ones we think are the most important ones in terms of the road towards now probably Azerbaijan and particularly COP30 in Brazil. And within that, we might be able to find some very strong common denominators of collaboration, some areas of collaboration, because we're going to continue doing all the other stuff anyway, like whether it's on region or protein and smallholders or whatever it might be. All of that is still going to continue, but if you can find some small common denominators of collaboration and agree on priorities, that would be interesting, because if we try to do everything, all of us together, it's never going to work.
Was that a drop? The Azerbaijan caught some of us by surprise. Is that really happening? Azerbaijan?
Rumors. I don't know. I just heard.
Chris Hagedorn is smiling, and it has a knowing smile. I was gonna riff on the point about building the Venn diagram of theories of change. So on a more micro, though sometimes it feels super macro, a micro application of that is an exercise we just went on with the Global Alliance for the Future of Food on this question of how can we have a more aligned and coordinated approach as philanthropy on our strategies for regenerative, agroecological, and indigenous foodways. So we recognize, frankly, how small the philanthropic contribution is to that space and how much we can catalyze private and public investment, but we do have totally different TOCs. So together, we're now 24 philanthropies that did this on this journey to start to examine like the self-reflection. What actually are we funding? What are all the sort of leverage points in the system to accelerate this transition that are common between us and distinct? And then we supported it with some just like hard-nosed analytics of what is the cost of this transition. And so just in terms of, one of the key asks from Brent of like what's been happening week 1 at COP, on December 1st, we launched this shared, it's called Cultivating Change. It's on the Global Alliance for the Future of Food website that puts down the numbers, puts down some hypotheses of leverage points that we could take. But what we've recognized is that gives a more coherent depiction of what we can be as philanthropy, but it still gets really nuanced if you're talking Brazil, India, East Africa. And so that's actually the other piece of the puzzle on the regen front for philanthropy is we're going to start this exploration in a more regionally focused way to start to examine players, dollars, leverage points, to almost like prototype how we can be more catalytic, more leveraged, and overcome this huge bottleneck, which is the money is just not getting to the ground. That's true for climate finance. It's very true for IPLCs, Indigenous people for whom it's 0.6% of philanthropic spend. That's it. That is all the money that's coming. So we just have so far to go. And maybe just to add a couple more dots on the regen side, it does feel like there was a ton, especially early in last week, ton of excitement around the finance piece of this. There was 100 CEOs that gathered on December 1st, sort of talking about what do collaborative capital arrangements look like? What are the new mechanisms? What are the new structures? I think there is a lot of excitement, but coming back to a point you made, Peter, these conversations are still sort of like private investors are having a conversation, MDBs are having a conversation, philanthropy is having a conversation, corporates are having a conversation. And I think the trust is so fragile, if existent at all, especially with the constituencies who've gotten the worst deal over and over and over again, the Indigenous peoples communities, smallholder farmers. And I think that's why we really rely on allies like the Global Alliance for the Future of Food that over years has built those trusted relationships, but there's still a lot of cautiousness about who we can be on a panel with and who we can engage and how quickly we can engage and what are the safeguards for the engagement. So I don't know, as somebody whose whole career has been about collaboration, I feel this constant, like it's by the hour push between we should be doing it faster and no, we should be doing it so much slower, faster, slower, faster, slower, all within the bigger narrative of the science, which is like faster or die. And I don't know about each of you, but you asked like on a personal level, it's like this constant sense of dis-ease, like our tempo isn't right, our collaborations aren't deep enough, even as we do feel the excitement of wins like the Emirates Declaration and the non-state actor declaration. You have to start somewhere. And even we talk about within regen, this like shallow to deep, it's not binary. There is gradual continuous improvement, but it's just not deep enough, fast enough. And that feels like the thing we've gotta crack. Yeah, I feel like I just brought down the energy. You know, here, I'm gonna redirect though. We also talked about youth, and there's a couple awesome youth representatives here, and I think we'd all love to hear like week 1 on food and youth. What happens? Are there wins? Are there gaps? Are there dots we should be connecting on? I'm gonna pass it to Nika.
There's a bunch of youth here. Sophie, maybe you want to take this actually. I'll pass it to her. She's actually doing great work, and then I might add to what she says.
I just knew you were going to do that. I'm over here with my ice lolly. We've done a lot in week 1. I think we've managed to get very far as a youth group. We have also plenty other young people, so I can't speak on behalf of everyone, but in the Food Systems Pavilion, for example, we have youth co-hosts of that pavilion, which is really, really exciting because oftentimes youth-led organizations don't have the funds to participate in pavilions here at COP. And as part of the pavilion, we have youth demands through a youth delegation that aligns with the Youngo demands that they're bringing into the UNFCCC negotiations. And they're all online, so please do take a read. And we've managed to spread ourselves thin, but I think deep, in many events and conversations going around. I was just at the Aim for Climate event between the UAE and the US, and I had a little conversation with them afterwards, and they said that they would co-implement with young people, especially youth smallholder farmers going forward, and they've got over, what did they say, over 625 partners and over $17 billion worth of investment that they just announced today. So I think that's really exciting, even having that commitment and also having that declaration that was put out that you said that we can now hold them to account on what they've said. But I think as a youth group, we do need to have a better narrative because as you said, we're so broad. Even as a sector, but also as a youth constituency, we hold so much power, but our narrative sometimes becomes weak when we come into rooms and sometimes we're asking for different things. So there's positive and negatives, I think, to every constituency, but I'm only one person. Did you want to add? And I'll also hand it back here. Well, this is my first COP, so you're asking me quite a big question. Over the past week, I really have just been figuring out the space. So I can tell you what success in food systems transformation or food system amendments, because we can't transform everything, looks like. And that would look like incorporating young people in the co-creations of national pathways that are coming out of the UN Food System Summit, but also the co-implementers of those pathways and including more young people onto national delegations. And also more financing for young people to be able to lead change, and that includes innovative financing, but also flexible financing. And when it comes to monitoring and evaluation, we need better systems of monitoring and evaluation for young people, so that young people can be, their capacity can be built in monitoring and evaluation. But most young people work in social movements. So monitoring a social movement under current donors, monitoring and evaluation methods is so difficult. You ask me what the impact of my social movement is. I'm going to give you numbers of how many people are in an event, how many people spoke, but that doesn't tell you what impact we're making, really. So I think we need to be more transformative in that space as well. But you asked about COP, and I'm going to hand you over to someone who's been at many more COPs than I have.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lana. I have been following and focusing on youth and food systems in UN policies, processes, particularly UNFCCC. I think in terms of what young people want, we do have a clear document that comes out every year, which is the Global Youth Statement from Youngo, and that has the compiled youth priorities from the young people and children's representation, and we have a food and agriculture section each year, so that's a concrete document that you can check. We put that together before COP every year, and then I think one aspect that's interesting about the youth and children engagement in the UNFCCC space is that we do have the ability to speak in the negotiations, and so that's something that we work on for food and agriculture. The Sharm el-Sheikh joint work, long name, that we make sure that we are really engaging there because we have that mandate to represent children and youth there and to engage with the negotiators and to speak in the sessions. We worked on a really powerful speech this year about the young people that will be impacted when this process does not move forward and just has procedural outcomes as it has come to. I think one other aspect that I will build on from Sophie is that youth engagement in the pavilions. We have youth engagement also in the Food for Climate Pavilion, and I think in terms of like the 3 key food pavilions, I think this is the one that does not have like a key youth involvement component. But we are here, we have key priorities, and want to encourage everyone to have young people and think about that as much as possible. We've seen some sessions that, for instance, that say different stakeholders that need to be engaged in food systems and not seeing a youth representative there. And I've definitely been in many of the smaller meetings where I'm the only young person there. So definitely something that we need to think about more. From youth or from me? I think some of the biggest opportunities this year are that Leaders Declaration on Food, Agriculture, and Climate Action, also the Declaration on Climate and Health. If we can get more countries and more ambition and more concrete plans on moving that forward into implementation and action and having young people be part of that.
Can I just add to Lana's point quickly? So, yeah, in terms of what you said, Lana, about youth being in the pavilions, there's also the Eco Pavilion, which has a lot of more industry-related events, and I go to a lot of those, and I find myself being the only youth in those rooms. But I think the reason why that is because, just to give you all a picture of youth at COP, there's probably 30 to 50 youth working in agriculture around, like, globally that are at COP. Like, it's not a huge delegation of us. There's a lot more youth working on fossil fuels, and then there are a lot of youth at COP, but their employers, for example, are the national governments, and so they actually have a lot of other responsibilities, and they're not able to come out to pavilion events and engage in that way. So I think capacity building to bring more youth to COP so that there's more of us here to be able to attend more events and to be able to go outside of the COP venue, as she was mentioning there, and be able to represent our voices is going to be really important. Just, yeah, capacity building to be able to bring youth here so that they can share.
Great. Yeah, let's get some more voices in here. Who was here last week and has some dots to connect for those that weren't?
Sorry, this is just a last short youth comment. I just think it's going to be really short, but just to build on what everyone else said, there's been earlier like the sentiment of we're all coming together and it's amazing, all the pavilions are together, and it's kind of like we're one big family. But as someone, it's my first COP, I'm a master's student, and I'm only like recently in the past few years in food and ag, it's quite hard to break into the family, and you definitely sense that like collegial spirit, and it's amazing to sense that excitement, but you're very much looking at it from the outside. And so I think I really love the ideas that people talked about earlier of having like a lot of the panels that are incredible, but maybe they can be on the outside where the people need to hear them, and then having one dedicated food space that can have these amazing conversations that we're having right now. Like, to me, this is incredible. It's really helpful. And if we have spaces where like these can continue, then I think it's much easier for youth to really get involved. And then once you start meeting one person, you can start that cascade of conversations. But like, especially, I mean, even just to talk about your first question, week one, it was really hard. I learned a lot, but it was very much like I was observing from the outside and could sense that familial congeniality. It just was like hard to break in. So that's just a little ask, is like, it's lovely to see your colleagues and friends and mentors, but also maybe like if you look at the youth in the room and know that they know very few people here, also just like reaching out to them and asking their names and bringing them into the table as well.
Thanks, Sarah. And Brent and everybody else here is showing the kind of leadership that is really impressive, but long, I wouldn't say overdue, because the leadership's been there, but we're at a point where food and agriculture are finally being recognized for just how vital they are to our efforts to address climate. 30% of greenhouse gas emissions in food systems are key to keeping the system going. What I'd like to see, I agree, it's hard to come in from the outside and understand the power centers, the organizations who have vested interests. And so I'm glad to see the youth here. I'm teaching in Paris at Sciences Po and make it a point to involve my students. I teach on global food politics. So I think there's just looking for examples to be creative and bring people into the conversation. We all have the responsibility at individual level, what we choose to eat and respond politically, but professionally as well. I think we can all be more creative. Now, you asked about what we can do for future COPs, and I would say potentially we could strategize better as a community with a few key targets that we can, as distinct groups and communities, can circle around. And it's not just climate, it's, trade and subsidies. It's, when folks go home on Monday, it's likely the agreement that countries are going to agree to says very little about food. The declaration notwithstanding, yes, it's great. 144 and growing. We'll hear more about the implementation on Sunday at 11:30, but it's still a political declaration without numbers and targets. And so we'll all feel good about it, but it doesn't really change the facts on the ground, right? And so I think if we can all go back and think and come up with a way that we can strategize as communities in north, south, east, west, but look at how we get to governments and change the way the dynamic works in capitals so they show up with a plan that is significant and meaningful on real food system change. Otherwise, it's background noise in a overwhelming space. So I think there's a lot that can be done, and I'm involved in a group that's launching the Alliance of Champions for Food System Transformation. This will take place on Sunday, 10:30, with a kind of a photo event, and then the real event is being absorbed into the declaration event with the UAE at 11:30, and that will spark interest, right? This is a small group of countries who are demonstrating leadership, sort of the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance model, which is looking to identify the first mover countries and then have them show as an example, and sort of under embargo, which are the countries, but you'll be pleased to know which ones they are, even if it's a small group. And so in a year, we hope to have more countries who are self-identifying as leaders and willing to take the political risk, because we know it's very risky for all of them. And we have to be there as the civil society and community, private sector, to back them. Because politicians, by definition, prefer not to take risks. Otherwise, they don't get reelected. So let's figure out a way, when we do strategize, identify some targets, identify some areas that we can go after, support FAO with its roadmap. Be creative. Are there, can we identify discussions we can have as stockholders with businesses? Can we figure out a way to bring students in a more creative way? Can we look at merging the food community's efforts with the energy, with agrivoltaics, for example? There's lots of ways that we can get out of our stovepipe, and avoiding the egos and the competition is not easy, but it needs to happen if we're going to have real effect. So.
If we might also, I'm thinking Vivian, and then let's go to Lawrence. One of the things the Global Alliance for the Future of Food encouraged members like the Rockefeller Foundation to do was to pool money to sponsor frontline leaders from communities, indigenous communities, farming communities from across the global south. We don't have many of them in this room, and I just want to recognize that means our reflections don't have the full depth of perspectives, but maybe Vivian, we could pass it to you of like, what have you observed from week one, and yeah, kind of help us ground some of these perspectives.
Thanks, Sarah, for putting me on the spot. I'm Vivian Madweke, and I work with the Global Alliance for the Future of Food. And we were fortunate to bring to COP 42 frontline leaders, farmers, fishermen, frontline advocates. And one of the things I've acknowledged is the fact that we understand our role as the Global Alliance, that our role is at international level, but we also know that the action is at the national level. Most times, by the time we come to COP, positions are already set, and there's only so much we can do by the time we're at COP. So our strategy is to work with our frontline leaders to put the pressure on their national governments. And what I've observed in the last 1 week, in fact, before I came for this event, I was at the Uganda Pavilion, And one of our frontline partners was leading an event on food systems, culture, and conservation. And it's exciting to see that they are understanding how the COP process works, they're engaging in their country pavilions, they are understanding how the international processes can work with their national government. So for us, that's quite exciting. Another thing we've seen is when we speak together, our voices are louder. And seeing those frontline groups working together, someone from Bangladesh working with someone from the Philippines, they're already thinking about how to build movements within their region. That is exciting as well. To be honest, we haven't done as much, like you said, you know, a click, sort of the click within our community. Probably there's room to open it more to more frontline leaders so that they feel welcome by both the side events, but also even just warming up to them. I think that's an opportunity we can take advantage of. Thanks. Lawrence?
Yeah, Lawrence. Yeah, the health side of things, Lawrence and Ali. I mean, I'd love to hear your perspectives in terms of reflecting on. Do you feel like this is your second COP? How are you feeling about being here? Your third COP. How are you feeling about being here, Lawrence? Do you feel like the health side of things is being, addressed and discussed in, like, the food discussions, consumption side of things also?
I thought I was sneakily hiding behind this column.
Never.
To avoid having a gentle snooze. No, thanks for asking me. And I don't know who are the organizers here, but congratulations. This is a great idea. No panelists, just talk. It's great discussion. Let's see. I really liked Martina's. So I never answer your questions, right? I really liked Martina's comments. We are, as a community, there's bonding social capital, and then there's bridging social capital, and we've got the bonding stuff really right. And I think it was Robin I really liked what she said as well. So we need these moments where we bond, we share information, we try to coordinate, we try to collaborate better than we are. It's a moment where we tell everyone else to collaborate, but we also need to collaborate. And then it's the bridging stuff we need to do better, I think. So we need to be in other people's panels. We need to be in the country pavilions panels. We need to be in the water panel, the energy panel. All of these, we need to infiltrate and be guerrillas, guerrilla warfare, get food everywhere. What's happening on food and nutrition? We had this weird thing where Health Day was the 3rd and Food Day is the 10th. And so nutrition can be, I'm from the Global Alliance to Improve Nutrition. Nutrition can be a useful bridge. I would say that, wouldn't I? But I think it can be. But I think really, when thinking about the declaration, which I think is great, I'm a big fan of the declaration. I remember where it was a glint in everyone's eye a year ago, and it's here. It's kind of remarkable to think the UAE was worried about would anyone sign it, but they were at one stage. The action now is at the country level, right? As it always has been. So the declaration gives us all, not permission, but it's like it gives us an added incentive. It means we can talk to people at the country level and say, your government has signed this. You've made a commitment. But it's all at the next stage is how do we operationalize this declaration? What does it mean? And I think of it in two ways. One is the declaration creates some space. We now need to talk about getting food and I would say nutrition into NDCs, into NAPs. Yes, that's obvious. But there are other opportunities. We just did an analysis with SUN and WHO and FAO under the banner of ICANN, which is the Initiative on Climate and Nutrition. And we did an analysis of all the procurement policies. Governments buy loads of food, right? Some countries, they buy a quarter of the food. What are the procurement policies that guide those purchases? What do they say? Well, they don't say much. Actually, they don't say much about nutrition, but they also don't say much about climate. So this is a massive opportunity for the climate community to build climate into food procurement. Similarly, food-based dietary guidelines. Brent knows a lot more about this than I do, but more than half of all food-based dietary guidelines don't say anything about sustainability of food. It's kind of amazing. Same on the climate side. Only 3% of Green Climate Fund grants last year had anything to do with nutritious foods. Massive opportunity for the nutrition community and nutritious food community, but also for the climate community, because food is kind of this undiscovered country for the climate community, really. So we have to make it easier for the climate community to engage with us, and the only way to do that is to really understand the rest of them. And so we have to really invest in who they are, what do they think, what motivates them. We're never going to drag them really into our space. We need to drag food into their space, I think. But most of it's at the country level, and the coordination, I think, has to be at the country level. Global coordination is nice to have, but country coordination is essential to have.
One last comment. We're running out of time, so if you could just keep this a little bit quick. We've got 2 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we get out of here on time because we've got to move the chairs back.
Sure. My name is André Degenstein. I'm with Ibirapitanga Foundation, which is a philanthropic organization based in Brazil. I wanted to make one comment that I think it refers to some of the issues that were brought up regarding more voices and the north-south, divide. At the same time that I agree with the comments and the need for bringing these voices to COP so that they can be here and participating in the debates, I think unless we work on this throughout the year, in the other networks that we are part, in our forums, organizations, whatever we do here will be reproducing the same imbalances that we see everywhere else. No matter, regardless the fact that these people will be here, it is overwhelming, it was already said. So it's very difficult to bridge this gap in an event such as this one. So if we really want to address that, we need to look inside our own networks, organizations, alliances that we are part of. We are members of the Global Alliance. I think this work needs to begin back there. And then we will see this diversity working in events such as the COP.
Well, that's a great comment to end on. And we would just like to thank each one of you for a different event. Hopefully this was a bonding. Yeah, let's make it an annual event. I think this is a nice midway in terms of being able to reflect and think about it. I think this is a nice bonding opportunity for us to come together and just kind of share. Now we just need to think about bridging, moving forward. And when we speak together, our voices are louder. So let's start speaking together. Let's start bridging those opportunities. And thanks for your time. And we look forward to part 2 tomorrow, where we'll dig into it. Lasse, we can dig into it more. So thank you, everybody. Yep. If you can help us put chairs away, that would be fantastic. Thank you.